Hey, Bob. Hey, Linda. Welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey, guys. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you guys here.
Absolutely.
We are, number one, big fans of
Very
you all's
much so.
platform, Seed Time. And we are glad to have you here to share your incredible financial journey with everybody, because a lot of people are looking for hope and inspiration on their own personal journeys. A lot of people are not sure that they can do what needs to be done. And so we're glad that you all were willing to come and talk about not only where you are today, but where you all started from. So for those of you that are not familiar with you and your platform and your story, can you just take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone and let them know what you're all about?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Bob Lotich. This is my wife, Linda. And the gist of it is similar to you guys, we're trying to help people get out of debt. We're trying to help people understand kind of some biblical principles when it comes to money, and that God actually has a plan for us to win with money. And that's just been a passion of mine for a long time, since he brought me through a lot of my own financial stupidity. And Linda's kind of stepped into more and more of a role in all this and becoming more and more of a part of it. And it's been really fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about your story a little bit. Give our audience a little bit of the background in regards to your debt. Tell our audience, how much debt was it that you guys had? How much did you pay off? How long did it take you to pay off?
Yeah. So similar to you guys, I was kind of getting to be, I'm sure I wasn't the financial rock star that you were, Ty, when we got married, but I was like on my way. I was reading and learning a lot and like moving forward financially, paying off my own personal debt, and had made a good amount of progress. Linda, on the other hand, brought a little debt into the marriage, right?
I mean, we both had some debt.
Yeah, I'm not at all passing it off on you.
So when we got married, I was kind of in this, math does not come naturally to me. I'm the type of person that has to add things 3 times with a calculator, and I get different numbers every time, So I was just super overwhelmed by it. So I would always pray. I would say, God, I pray that I marry a man who's good at math, which seems like a silly thing to pray, but I knew it was a weakness for me and I needed help. So I married Bob, which was awesome. And I just had no clue. And I kind of said, please take over and just tell me what I need to do, because I don't want to have to think about this. It stresses me out. Yeah. And he was more than happy to do that, because he was like, okay, he was kind of at that point where he wanted to have control.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was kind of where we started. So once we got married, we had about $46,000 in debt, I think. It was something like that. And we just started, making sacrifices and doing everything we could. And
chipping away.
And I remember telling you, really early on, that I think this is going to work. It's going to be painful for a little while, but I think it's going to work. Yeah. And so
it was painful.
Yeah. And so we made a lot of sacrifices. I mean, you basically went from spending 150% of the income that you made while you were living at your mom's house, to once we got married, you were living on maybe 10% of your income.
Probably.
Because we were spending so much money focused on our debt. And so like Linda's lifestyle changed so dramatically from the amount of money that she was spending, like disposable income, that like I couldn't believe
it wasn't
that you didn't just like
it was
run.
Quick. It was really fast transition.
Yeah, so she was a rock star in just being really flexible and adaptable, and jumping on this goal together to really focus on getting this debt paid off. But that's kind of where we started with. Our starting point was about $46,000 in debt, and so let's go from there.
Yeah, I know part of your story was the power of giving. It was, you kind of hit a low point in your journey, and you were asking God for some guidance, and he gave it to you. Can you kind of talk about how you got to that low point, what God told you, and how you walked it out?
Yeah, so I think when I'm trying to remember the timing of all this, but the gist of it for me was, I feel like God just began to unlock this idea of seed time and harvest, which is part of why we named the site that we can plant things in the ground, in the natural, but we can also do this in the spiritual, and we can also do this financially. And, the Bible says that there will always be seed time and harvest. And so I felt like he began to unlock for me this idea that we can give, and it's not money that's gone from us. It's like, it might not be in our bank account at this moment, but that we can give what we have. And I think Ecclesiastes says, if you cast your bread on the waters, it'll return to you after many days. And we've just seen that. It's just been the more we've given, the more we've stretched our faith in giving, and just the more we've seen God just provide for us. And some of it's financial, but some of it's other things too, And so there was one day, I was probably 31 years old. I'm 37 now. So 6 or 7 years ago, where I was praying to God about how do we move to the next level? Like, we had some financial goals we were trying to reach. And I felt the Lord speak to me that if you want to really see what I can do, I want you to start giving your age as a percentage of your income. And I'm like, does that work? Like, can we even do that? And I'm starting to run numbers in my head. Like, can I even pull that off? And anyway, and so we decided to try it. And that first year, it was 31% of our income. And it worked out well. And not surprisingly, that happened to be the same year that we paid off our mortgage. And it's like, that just doesn't make sense that you would give so much more of your income away and then you pay off your mortgage, but that's just the way of the kingdom. That's the way God works. And so we just have continued it from then. And now we're, continuing to do that. We're at 37% of our income. And we hope to be able to do this the rest of our lives and get to that 90-10 point and just, continue to see what God has for us.
Mm-hmm. Now, when Bob came home and said that God told him this, Linda, what was your initial response?
Okay. So it's funny because people ask this question a lot, how we dealt with this, how Bob's hearing something, feeling like he's getting something from God. And am I just, flipping out over it? The answer is no. I was not flipped out over it. I was I got really excited about it. And I think this is why we have made a point to not live, our standard of living is below what we're making, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, did I say that right? Yeah. Not the financial one here, obviously. But so it wasn't like we were like, okay, it's either groceries or give. We were never put in that position. So, and it was honestly on both of our hearts to be able to give a lot of money, but we just didn't know where to take that. So when he came home and said this, it was kind of like, okay, great. Now we actually have a plan, and we have, something that we can start doing now. And if God changes the plan, then he changes the plan,
Yeah. Yeah. And we had, previous to this, we'd been talking about, because like she was saying, we had kind of capped our standard of living to basically we have enough money coming in to take care of all of our needs. Anything over and above, it's we just don't really need it. And so by capping our standard of living and not just, we made twice as much this year, so we're going to spend twice as much, and we're going to buy an $80,000 car that we don't really need. It was just, it gave us more headroom to make it possible. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And if our standard of living would have rose to what our actual earnings were for that year, we would have been in trouble the next year, came around where we didn't earn as much, but B, we wouldn't have had that headroom to be able to do that.
Yeah, love that. Now, I'm sure that some may be also thinking that while you guys were giving, were you also saving for your future at the same time, i.e. investing or 401ks or IRAs or something like that?
Yeah, we've never.
Take it away, Bob.
we've never stopped, saving for the future and retirement savings or anything like that. We haven't been to the point where it's cut into that and where it's been an either or thing. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's something that the Lord laid on our hearts, and so we're gonna do it regardless, and we're going to trust that that's what he has for us, and if he says that's not what I have for you now, then we'll change. But like this previous year, like I was telling you guys before, we had taken 2017 as a sabbatical year. So the income dramatically changed, not working for an entire year. And yet we continued to do that in faith, and we saw God do some really miraculous things throughout, So
let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there, because I think that's a huge
We're not going to just gloss over that,
and
Bob.
some people may be saying, okay, what is a sabbatical? We know what it is, but walk our audience through that. You guys took an entire year off, no work. How did that look? How did you even come to that decision? Yeah, and just the ins and outs to it. And what was the rewards after the year was up?
Yeah, so early in 2017, let me step back one more. Every year for the last 6 or 7 years, I have taken a month off work, just as a month-long sabbatical. And it's just been one of the most amazing things for my head, for my spiritual life. We take a month to plan and pray about the year and see what God's leading us to for that year. Normally January or February of each year.
And we fly south.
And we fly south. Out of Chicago, out of Nashville, we go way south where it's like 70 degrees and sunny. And so anyway, so early 2017, we did that and we left. And 2016 had been a really, really difficult year for me. A lot of just strenuous work and just really drained me in a lot of ways. So we take the sabbatical, and after the sabbatical month is over, I just felt like just as drained as when we started it, which, I know that
never happened.
I know that anybody listening to this is just like, that's just insane. You would take an entire month off. But I was just that kind of drained, that overworked or whatever. And
well, normally he's chomping at the bit to get back to work. He's like, I have so many ideas. I just can't wait to,
Yeah,
do
normally
this.
2 weeks into the sabbatical, I just can't wait for it to be over because I want to get back to work. And this one, I just didn't feel like that. So I prayed, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll take another week off. We'll continue another week. And I did that. And then somewhere in all this, I had a conversation with Linda, and I told her that I kind of feel like the Lord is asking me to take the whole year off. And, again, like, this is the awesome woman that the Lord has landed me with. She wasn't freaked out. Like, tell them what you were thinking about that.
Well, yeah. So we were driving home. We drove from Nashville to Phoenix. That was our Phoenix, Arizona. It was a long.
It's further than it looks on a map.
Yeah, it's a good, 30 something hour drive.
Yeah, a long time.
So we're driving home, and he tells this to me. He's like, I don't feel like I'm done yet. He's like, I think I just might take a little bit of extra time. I'm like, okay, that's fine, because, it's great for me. Like, we had one child at the time, and I was like, yeah, play with him some extra. I'll get some extra time to myself, But as he's telling me this, he's reminded of our pastor in St. Louis when we lived there, who had taken a year off.
Before he started the church.
Yeah, before he started the church.
Yeah.
And
a year-long sabbatical, yeah.
He took a year-long sabbatical. So he says this, and immediately I feel he's going to take a year off. This is like what I kind of feel in my heart. He's going to take the year off. And so but I don't say anything because he needs to come to that conclusion by himself. You know what I mean? So
what was it, like 2 weeks later? So
God was just really gracious to me to give me that heads up.
Yeah, he gave you a heads up on it. So
a couple weeks later, he comes home and he's like, I really think that I'm supposed to take the year off. And I was like, I know. That really was God's grace on the whole thing, because that is something that could totally freak me out,
Yeah, well, a lot of people,
Yeah. Understandably.
All right, so moving to the next part of all this, at that point, we just started moving into the year off thing. I'm going to let you direct me with some questions where you'd like me to head next with this.
Okay, well, I want to back up just a little bit because
this is good, by the way.
This is great. So it's easy for us to
I got a feeling he might be getting some ideas.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Not yet. The Lord ain't said it to me yet.
Maybe a month or two.
So, but I want to come back to that though, because it's easy for us to comprehend how, because we know you guys a little bit. But for the person that's got their earbuds in right now, one, they want to know, how did you set your life up to even take a month off every single year? And then 2, how did you position yourself to take a year off?
We need to start doing that.
Tell us how you were able to set your life up to do either one of those, because that is not normal for most people.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and to be honest, I used to work in a job where it was hard to get a day off. Like I can relate. I am familiar with that, and I know how, there are people who just to have a Sunday off, like that would be a world-changing thing, and I highly recommend it. Like, I feel like God just has taught me so much about rest and what it means, like what Sabbath truly means, and it's not a legalistic thing. It's an opportunity, an invitation that we have, And anyway. So in terms of setting things up, yes, I'm an entrepreneur. I run an online business, similar to you guys. I'm a content creator and all that. And, and I think there's a freedom and a flexibility that comes with that. But as well, you guys know this as well as I do, that it's really easy when you're your own boss to honestly be more constricted and more tied to your business than as an employee. And so while I have the opportunity to say I can take off any time, the reality is that work never ends and my brain never stops working. It's just like always thinking about work in some capacity. And so anyway, but when I began building the business, I kind of framed it through that lens. Like, how can I build a business that doesn't run my life? And I just kind of asked that question when I was growing the business, and even still now. What it did by asking that question, it allowed me to say no to certain opportunities that might have been really lucrative, might have been great opportunities, but that didn't pass that filter. You know what I mean? And so ultimately, it's led me to leave a good amount of money on the table in terms of passing up opportunities, but to be able to set the business up in a way where I have the flexibility to do that, that was really important to me. So just speaking practically kind of along these lines, I have an assistant who helps out, and that was how we did the first month. So the first time I took a week off from the business, I was freaked out. I was terrified. I thought the whole thing was going to come crashing down, and I would go back and Google wasn't sending me any traffic and no one was come to my site anymore. And that was like the biggest step of faith, was taking an entire week off, not checking email, not looking at anything, and doing that for an entire week. But that set the stage for being able to do a month, and after I did a week, then I tried a month. And again, I was terrified but nothing bad happened, and so
he was happy and also a little bit sad that nothing bad happened.
Yeah, it was.
They don't really need me.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things where it's like there's a lot of things that seem urgent that just aren't really that urgent. And, so I did things like I set an autoresponder on my email account and said, I'm gone for a month. And side note, if you use the word sabbatical, there's people have more of a respect for it. Just randomly, I noticed that. If you say I'm taking a month off, adios, like people might get annoyed. But if you say it's a sabbatical leave, they respect it a little more. But anyway, I threw an autoresponder on, said I'm gone for the month, and if it's urgent, you can email me at this urgent email address, and it'll go to my assistant. And if it's not, you can email me again after the month. And and anyway, I just found that there's so many things that we as business owners think are really urgent that actually aren't that big of a deal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Policy Genius guarantees the best life insurance price for you and those you love. It's so simple to protect your family today in 5 easy steps. 1. Calculate quotes. 2. Compare companies. 3. Apply online. 4. Receive expert advice. And 5. Rest easy. It really is that simple. Calculate, compare, apply with Policy Genius. For more info, head on over to hisandhermoney.com/Policy Genius.
Now, for the person that's listening that is an employee, 2-part question for you. 1, on your own personal journey, how did you set yourself up to become a full-time entrepreneur from employee? And for those that are employees, what would be your advice to them on how to incorporate? Because you said God taught you a lot about rest and the importance of it. what would be your advice to them on how they can do that if they don't have their own business?
Yeah. Okay. So working backwards, I think as an employee, I just, I'm sure you guys have seen this too, but I just noticed so many areas of our walk with God where God wants to see how we handle the thing that we've been given. It's just straight out of the parable of the talents. Like, he's given us something, and how are we going to handle it? How are we going to treat our possessions? Are we going to honor, what has been given to us and respect it? Or are we going to treat it as common and treat it as a piece of junk and then ask for something better? And in terms of like the Sabbath, I think one of the simplest things is just committing to taking a Sabbath each week, and so whatever, if that's Saturday or Sunday for you, depending on where you fall in that debate, I think it just doesn't matter, but just committing to that. And again, I don't think it should be out of a religious obligation. I have a past where I came out of a church with some religious obligations, but I don't think it should be that. I think it should be, I'm going to trust you, God, that if I choose not to work today, if I choose not to check business email on this day, that you're going to take care of it. And not only that it's actually going to work out better for my benefit. And as an employee, I think that's, I didn't do that when I was an employee, but now knowing what I've known and learned, like, that's how I would approach it. And I think that's just a great stepping stone to kind of move into, what God has and for you, what that next step is.
Yeah. And I would also add to that. There are people who it's like they have to work 7 days a week. Like, that's the position that they're in. They're fighting for their finances. And I still think that just taking a set amount of time, anything that you have, one evening or, a few hours here or there, and just setting it aside for rest. And we read an amazing book about this.
Yeah.
And it's called The Rest of God. And it talks about the Sabbath, but it's not in a religious way. Like, I always heard, about taking the Sabbath, and it was like, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And it's actually not about that. It's really about putting your trust in God that some of these things that you feel like you have got to get done will get done at another time. So that book is really amazing, and I think really changed our perspective on the whole idea of resting in God, taking a Sabbath, and just letting him take care of the things that we think are our responsibility.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there are some people that have to work 7 days a week, and I still think that there is availability for that. It might be hard to find, but it's definitely available.
Yeah, for sure. To the first question, in terms of starting a business, what I did was I just started doing something. I was kind of paralyzed. I had wanted to start a business for probably 4 or 5 years before I ever did. And people would ask me, well, what kind of business do you want to start? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to start a business. Like, I don't care what it is. I just want to be involved in a business. And I was just paralyzed by fear in a variety of ways and didn't know how to get started. And I finally just started doing something I was interested in. And I was reading about, I was learning about money. I was kind of at the beginning of my journey of, paying off my debt. And I was reading a lot of Proverbs, and I'm like, wait a minute, the Bible actually talks about money. Like, this is crazy. I had no idea. And so I was just fascinated by this. I'm like, I'll just start writing about it on the internet. And, I had no idea what was going to come of it. I really had no idea that it ever would have turned into a full-time income. But the point is I took what I had and I started serving with it. And I think that is just a great starting place for anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur. Find a way to serve. Find a way to take some of the gifts that God's given you and help someone else with them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So good.
And so
I just want to say this, though. Just so anybody out there is probably saying, well, Linda, were you working outside of the home? Like, just clear that up. Like, when Bob decided to take this 1 year off, this 1 year sabbatical, how did that look?
I was not working outside the home.
Now, Linda's been retired for 4 or 5 years?
Since 2010, I think.
Oh, wow. Longer than that. Wow.
I think that's
so she's been at home with our kids, as long as they've been around, and a couple years before. So it was a pretty big faith test that God brought us on.
Definitely. But I also think that it speaks volumes as well, too, of your hard work that you both put in prior to this sabbatical, that you were sort of able to put this business on autopilot and still reap the benefits or the rewards from it. I think that's something to say about that as well.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm curious, Linda, because I'm smart enough to know that Bob can't do this stuff if the household isn't being ran well,
right.
if the children aren't being taken care of. I'm only smart enough to know that because I know how hard my wife works. And I think that goes unheralded way too often. We look at the visionary and the vision caster, and we don't look at what it takes to allow the visionary to execute on vision. So, Linda, speak to us about, because number one, you have to take a personal journey from, like you all mentioned earlier, you were spending 150% of your income to dropping down to maybe 10%. That's no small feat, number one. And then number two, after you became a wife, now you're a mother, and you all adjusted your lifestyle down. All of these are adjustments for you personally. Talk about your ability to hold the fort down, for lack of a better term, and set your household up in such a way that you all can take these risks, because these were risks. We can see what happened at the end, but in the moments where you all were making these decisions and choices, this was risky. Right. So talk to us about all that went into that.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to think where to start. I'm trying to put it into words. I very much I have really come to terms with my personality type. Okay. So Bob is really the self-starter, go-getter, like he can run this business and he loves it and it's exciting for him. Whereas I feel like if I had to run a business, I would get bored and I would give up really easily. So, however, I am a great supporter. So I think that's the first thing is realizing my strengths and weaknesses, and that just because I'm not the type of person who would start my own business. Actually, I did. I had like a little blog for a while, and Bob basically did all of the work. Like I almost did nothing. I wrote my post and that's it. And I'm like, I don't know how to post. I don't know how to put this up. I don't know how to change this. He did all of it. So, which quickly fizzled out because I just didn't have what it took to run it, or maybe I just didn't want to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's part of it is once I realized that I'm such a good supporter, I kind of really got into that. And, in my head, like on the days that are tough, taking care of the kids or doing whatever, I think it is my job to support him, so that's where I just figured out kind of how God made me and how I can contribute the best that is possible.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it. Does that answer the question?
No, I think
and she's fantastic. Like I thank God all the time for this. And I do think there's an education as you get married of understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, the way God designed you. And, and I think in most cases, God puts us with somebody who has corresponding strengths for our weaknesses and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And the goal or the challenge a lot of us face is that we fight against that. And we see this person isn't as strong as me in this area. But in the reality, like we fit together like a puzzle if we approach it right. And that's just been really helpful for us in a lot of ways.
Love it.
Yeah.
So talk about the process as month 6 came, month 7, month 8, month 9. How was that? Were you itching to hurry up and get back, or was the Lord also downloading like visions and different things that you had to do once you got back to work? And then also talk about the rewards after the year was up. What did you learn from that sabbatical?
Yeah. All right. So I think it was probably month 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there where I I was a little bit less freaked out. I mean, like it's just like
that long.
It's like a faith journey, anything else, where I knew God had called me to do this. Like, I didn't come up with this myself. I knew he was going to pull me through it. But when you get your eyes off of the Lord and you start looking at the mountain, it's easy to get in fear once in a while. And so I was fighting that multiple times early on. But once we got to the 6 or 7 month point, I started to realize, I think we're going to make it. Like, I think we're going to make it through this. And I started to see some evidence that I think we're going to make it through. And I don't know. It was just really exciting. But to your other question, like, I had people ask me all year long, like, what has God said to you? Like, because everybody assumes if God's calling you to take a whole year off, like, I mean, it's going to be like, burning bush, like big stuff from God. And it was like kind of the opposite. Like almost the entire year, I just felt like, I'm waiting, God, like talk to me, give me something. And I just felt like I'm just sitting there waiting for some kind of big revelation. And
I think it was like the last week.
Yeah,
right?
Literally the last week of the year, I felt like God kind of gave me some specific direction for 2018 that kind of carries through this year a little bit. And in most of what he did in that year was really minor heart surgery. I didn't have any major sin. I didn't have any major things that, that needed to be tweaked. But I felt like he made like a whole bunch of little heart tweaks in areas of, like maybe just do this just a little bit different, or maybe do this instead of doing this. Stuff that like most people would think is completely insignificant. But, as we all know, if you are off 1 degree, but you continue that out for 20 years, it's like, you're way, way off in left field, versus hitting your target. Mm-hmm. And so that was a lot of the stuff that happened throughout that year. Now, I am still expecting more and more to happen. Like this whole thing was based off of Leviticus 25 and the whole Sabbath kind of idea that God lays out in Leviticus. And that was kind of how he dropped this on my heart and going through that passage. But the gist of it is, he says, or the Israelites are asking him, how are we going to eat in this 7th year when we take it off if we're not planting and harvesting anything? And God says, well, in the 6th year, I'm going to provide you enough that's going to cover you through the 7th year and the 8th year. And, not coincidentally, like our year before that was our biggest year ever. And we were able to fill up our savings accounts a little bit. And that is part of what kind of sustained us through that year. So it's just hilarious that God kind of, led me down a similar path with that. But we are still kind of, I think we're going to see the benefits from this for years to come. And we have seen a lot like internally, like I said, in our hearts. And, this is kind of a another thing that happened that wasn't a coincidence, but literally, maybe 5 or 6 weeks after I decided I'm going to do this sabbatical, we got a call from the adoption agency saying that they had adoption opportunity available for us. And with no notice, our daughter had been born the previous day. And so basically we just had our daughter dropped in our lap just a few weeks after I agreed to this. And we weren't expecting that at all. That was something we were expecting 6-9 months down the road. Mm-hmm. And the timing was just great, So I got to spend a lot of time with our new daughter and our 3-year-old boy. And it was just an amazing year.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I was about to say that I'm sure that the relationship, the marriage, and even with your children had to have been enhanced in some way of taking off a year. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was so good that we got to spend so much time together. And, I'll cherish it forever.
That's amazing.
All right, so everybody go quit your jobs. All right? No.
That's exactly what you're telling me to do.
No, but seriously.
Only kidding.
I'm just kidding. But at the
send
core,
your email talking about you told me to leave my job.
Guys, make sure you go to work tomorrow, okay? Seriously. But I think at the core of your story is amazing. It's giving and rest, okay?
And obedience.
Faith.
I think, and faith is always, that's always huge. But obedience sometimes can be so difficult because we put our own reasoning to it. We put our own mind to it, and instead of allowing God to actually direct our paths as long as we acknowledge him in all our ways. But sometimes we still try to put our own self in it. So that was huge obedience. It was almost like there was a test. And I'm sure that you both, your entire family, you all are going to reap from years to come because of this one obedience. I love it.
Amen.
It was, because your platform.
It was a test.
Your platform is huge. You know what I mean? It's not some little blog on the interwebs.
Yep.
It's a major source for a lot of people to get help with personal finance. And so for you to, this is, in my mind, this is akin to Abraham offering up Isaac.
I was just thinking of everything.
This is the promise.
This was a test.
This is the promise.
This was a test.
And he said to go up the mountain and sacrifice your son, and you did that by offering, saying, okay, I'll give you seedtime.com.
And I believe your children are going to reap there, and y'all, we can keep going on and on. This can turn into being
we're gonna take a text in a minute.
This is good,
but
man.
I believe that your children, because of your yes and because of your obedience, you don't even know the half of what your children is going to benefit from, even when they get older.
Yeah.
Because of this 1 year of sabbatical.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. I want to put a little bit of practicality and application to. I want to go back to your giving by age. Is this all going towards your local church? Do you give it to some charities? Like, how do you decide how to distribute this age-leveled giving?
Yeah. So in general, it's not all going to local church. We give 10% to our local church, and then beyond that, it's going to a lot of different charities. I think there's about 15 different charities that we support on a regular basis, like a monthly contribution. And then because we're self-employed business owners, our income changes. We don't really know until the end of the year what we actually, fully made with taxes and everything, like, business expenses all just kind of being balanced out. So we'll kind of like clean things up and get everything figured out at the end of the year, see if we're over, under, and then make adjustments from there. And that's always exciting when we get to kind of the end of the year and it's like, oh, great. We actually get to give a big chunk more. And so occasionally in December, we'll be able to give a big chunk to some organization that we want to support. But yeah, like 10% to our church, and then beyond that, sometimes it's different offerings at church and stuff, but there's a lot of different organizations.
Or if we feel led to give to an individual or, a GoFundMe page or anything like that.
There's been some individual stuff where, it's like God just put something on our heart, and it's like, great.
Any particular way that you all decide on the charities? Like, what's your vetting process? Because there's lots of people with charities and they're not all great. So is it just, I really enjoy this ministry, let me give to this ministry, or I really believe in this cause, let me give to this cause? Like, how did you all figure those out?
Yeah.
I think that's hard because there are so many charities out there. There are so many needs. And I think we're not all called to support everything. So I think just being okay with that and kind of coming to terms with that, but also, I think it was Andy Stanley maybe who said, do for one what you wish you could do for all. And so we've kind of taken a little bit of that approach. Things that we really just, our heart connects to, or there's been some ministries where it's like, we've really gotten a lot out of what they have done.
Yeah.
That we've chosen to give to them.
Yeah. So that's been a big part of it I think that's been a big part too. Like, for me personally, I really like giving to, organizations that are helping win the lost in one way or another, whether that's directly or indirectly. I would like our money to be involved in soul winning to some extent. Proverbs says he who wins souls is wise. And, if I can't be out, 24 hours a day evangelizing, like I would like some of my money to be doing that for me. You know what I mean? And so that's a big part of it. And now it's not to say that there aren't some organizations where it's extremely indirect, and some are really, I'm trying to think, some of them just aren't evangelizing at all. And anyway, in general, that's what I prefer. If there's some of the gospel is being preached through what we're giving, but in terms of other stuff, like some of it's just, what is God leading us to, and what are we feeling in our heart? And so
I would like for you all to speak to the listener, because everything that you all do is based on, like you said, seed, time, and harvest. And you all make the bold decision to give according to your age. That's not easy. The research shows that most people aren't even given the 10%, right?
Yeah.
So what can you attribute as some direct things that you have harvested as a result of these seeds? And then tell the person that's listening, maybe they can't do 37%. Maybe they're 37, but they can't do 37%. Speak to them and tell them what they could do.
Yeah, well, I mean, for what it's worth, like I do think each person should give. What is it, 2 Corinthians, maybe something where it says each person should give as he, purposes in his own heart. And I do think God is a different thing for all of us. But I think that we all should be continually stretching in our giving and stretching that faith muscle. And based on what you were talking about before about kind of the faith and obedience aspect, I think it's Hebrews. It says that without faith, it's impossible to please God. And that's always been one of those verses that it's like, really? Like without faith, it's impossible to please God, And I don't know, that's one that I just always hang on to, because the inverse of that is with faith, we please God. And so I'm looking for opportunities to obey. And I like this adventure of walking with God where, like, what's next? What crazy thing are you going to ask me to do next that I get to do, that I get to try? And giving is one of those things that we all have available to us. We all can give in faith, and we all can, stretch our giving regardless of what we're currently doing. And we get to see what God's going to do, and it's not necessarily, you're going to give something today and you're going to have a check in the mail tomorrow. And it's like, sometimes that happens and it's awesome when it does. And sometimes it doesn't. But the end of the day, like, God's word is true. And, something is going to happen as a result of that. And, the word says that if we give, it'll be given unto us good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. And so, I just believe that as, we, as believers continue to give and continue to stretch in that area, that good things are around the corner for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, I'm stirred up. This is great. We're happy that you all were able to step out on faith and God answered. The Bible says, especially specifically talking about the tithe in Malachi, he said, this is the only time. Yeah. This is the only time. He said, test me in this. And you all did that. And you guys are super inspiring. I think that everybody, self included, is challenged by the faith that you all walked out on. And to be able to just see, like you said, we know you guys a little bit. We know kind of, for lack of a better term, how the story ended, or at least how this chapter ended. And you guys are standing firm and even better than when you all started as a result of this. So thank you guys so much for being willing to be transparent and share your journey with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And I mean, and I love what you guys are doing. I'm so excited about your ministry, and I just pray God's blessings on everything you guys are doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.